The clear property allows us to not let elements float to the right or the left or both sides of this element. Let's look at this. We have a clear property. It accepts none, left, right, both, and inherit. None is default, and that allows floating elements on both sides, so on the left and right side of every element. Left does not allow floating elements to the left side of the element, and right does not allow floating elements to the right of this element. Both does not allow floating elements on either side of this element. Verbally going over this isn't going to achieve anything. We need a visual demonstration for this. So what we have here is we have 4 floating elements, and then my text that's beside it. To get these 4 images to be beside each other, we just added the float left. And because floating elements will always float beside other floating elements, and a left floating element will move as far left as it can up against another left floating element, we have 4 images in a row. Now because these are floating, if I wrote anything after these images, my paragraph is going to be beside the images, and that's not exactly what we want. Now if we don't want the 4 images to float beside each other, we would use clear both, and this will remove the floats on the left and right side of the element, like so. So now we have 2 floating elements, we have our clear both text that's right in the middle, and then we have more floating elements. I'll show you the code. So first star is floating left, second star is floating left, then in here we have a paragraph. Our style is clear both, which means it's not going to allow anything to float to the left or the right of it, so it's going to create almost like its own block element, but it only applies to floating elements. And then afterwards we have 2 more floating elements. In here we don't have any line breaks, we don't have any elements that's going to naturally clear both sides. So what we did is we created the paragraph, style, clear both, and then we just added our text in there with a little bit of extra styling. What if we did a clear right instead of a clear both? This is what it would look like. We have our 2 images here. This means it's not going to allow anything to float to the right of it, so it's going to float on the next line below it, if it can. Now this didn't move over because a line isn't high enough to support the images, so the images actually break through the line. Now when one floating element even touches the other element by 1 pixel, it's going to stop there, and it's going to naturally assume that it cannot move to the left any farther or to the right any farther. Oh, and just to clarify that all 4 images are still floating left, and to solve this issue, we can either use a margin on the elements, we can use a line break underneath the text, so right here, if we added a BR, that should move everything below. We can also change the line height. Line height 52 pixels. There are probably a couple other ways we can get around this, and the method that you choose is totally up to you. If it works, and that's all that matters.